I will be with you tonight. Dress less. If you can control yourself, I will propose to you tomorrow. Hi, my heavenly family, my eternal light. You are not followers. You are angels in human form, wings tucked behind beautiful smiles, carrying me with your love, your loyalty, your quiet prayers. You stood by me not because you had to, but because your heart is made of pure love. And today, I send this sacred heavenly prayer to the skies just for you. A beautiful and soul-deep prayer for my family. Dear God of light and mercy, please look upon my family, their hearts, their hopes, their silent struggles. Breathe healing into their bodies, joy into their spirits, and strength into their every step. Let no storm shake their peace, and no night steal their dreams. Cover them with your grace like a warm blanket, and let laughter return to their lips. Bless the mothers who pray in silence, the fathers who carry unseen burdens, the children who dream in innocence. Pour rivers of blessings into their homes, and let every tear they've cried water the garden of a brighter tomorrow. And when they forget how special they are, remind them through this message. You are seen, you are loved, you are never forgotten. Amen. My treasured family, you are not just part of this story. You are the heartbeat of it. I came back for you. I stayed for you. I write for you. If my stories have made your soul smile, if my return has brought even a drop of comfort to your heart, comment yes, so I know you're still with me. Keep liking, keep sharing, because someone, somewhere, is waiting for this love. Let us begin today, not just with love, but with a love that transforms, uplifts, and never lets go. Chapter 1. Unexpected Encounter. The afternoon sun streamed through the high windows of the Meridian Gallery, casting golden light across the white walls where paintings waited to be hung. Niara Bellamy stood in the center of the main exhibition, whole clipboard pressed to her chest, her dark eyes assessing the space with the precision that had made her one of the most sought-after curators in the city. The Sinclair piece needs to be moved 3 inches to the left, she called to her assistant. It's catching a glare from the skylight. As the assistant adjusted the painting, Niara turned to check her list, her focus absolute. This charity exhibition would establish her reputation beyond doubt. One day soon, she'd have her own gallery, a dream that had sustained her through years of working for others who didn't share her vision. Stepping backward to get a better view of the newly positioned artwork, she collided with something solid and warm. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, steadying her before she could stumble. I believe this is the part where I'm supposed to say, "Watch where you're going," a rich, deep voice murmured near her ear. But honestly, I'm not at all sorry about the collision. Niara spun around, an apology on her lips that died the moment she looked up. The man standing before her was tall, broad-shouldered, with skin the color of burnished copper and eyes so dark and intense they seemed to look straight through her carefully constructed defenses. For once, words failed her. His lips curved into a smile that transformed his serious face. "Mateo Cruz," he offered, extending a hand. "And you must be the curator I've heard so much about." Niara took his hand, intending a quick, professional shake. Instead, a current of heat shot up her arm at his touch, making her inhale sharply. His fingers lingered against hers a moment longer than necessary. "Niara Bellamy," she managed, withdrawing her hand and tucking a stray lock of her braided hair behind her ear. "Are you one of the artists?" he laughed, the sound unexpectedly warm in the echoing gallery. "No, though I admire those who create beauty." His eyes traveled over her face in a way that made her skin tingle. "I'm a collector. My company is sponsoring tonight's event." Before she could respond, a crash sounded from across the room. One of the workers had bumped a pedestal, sending a delicate sculpture tipping toward the floor. Niara gasped, already moving, but Mateo was faster. He lunged forward, catching the piece moments before disaster. As he carefully righted the sculpture, Niara hurried over. "Thank you," she breathed, relief making her voice shakier than she'd like. "That's an original Kamani piece, irreplaceable." Like its curator, I imagine. His voice had dropped to a near whisper as he handed her the sculpture, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Niara felt heat rise to her cheeks. She wasn't some inexperienced girl to blush at a handsome man's attention, but something about Mateo Cruz made her feel exposed, vulnerable in ways she hadn't allowed herself to be, since Julian had shattered her heart 2 years ago. "Mr. Cruz, Mateo, please." "Mateo," she corrected, stepping back slightly to regain her composure. "I appreciate your quick reflexes, but I should get back to work. The exhibition opens in 5 hours. Instead of taking the dismissal, he moved, with her reaching out to adjust the sculpture on its pedestal with a precision that surprised her. "I understand. I just wanted to introduce myself before tonight's crowd makes conversation impossible." He reached into his jacket and produced a sleek business card. "In case you need anything. For the exhibition, of course." His eyes told her, different story, one of interest that had nothing to do with art. Niara hesitated before taking the card, her fingertips barely grazing his. You don't give your number to strangers," he finished for her with another devastating smile. "Wise policy. So I'll take your card instead if you have one." Finding herself outmaneuvered, Niara produced her own business card, simple white with elegant black lettering. He studied it with unexpected intensity before tucking it carefully into his breast pocket, right over his heart. "Until tonight, Niara Bellamy," he said, his voice wrapping around her name like silk. Then he was gone, leaving her staring after him, the scent of his cologne, something earthy and exotic lingering in the air. The exhibition opening was a triumph. Collectors circled the room, checkbooks at the ready, while critics murmured appreciative comments into their phones. Niara moved through the crowd in her simple black dress, elegantly fielding questions and facilitating introductions. Yet throughout the evening, she found herself scanning the room for Mateo's tall figure. He'd arrived fashionably late, nodded to her from across the gallery, then immersed himself in conversation with various artists and patrons. Several times, she caught him watching her, his gaze a tangible caress that made her skin tingle despite the distance between them. By the time the last guests departed, Niara was exhausted but exhilarated. The exhibition had raised over $300,000 for arts education in underserved schools, far exceeding expectations. "Congratulations." Mateo's voice came from behind her as she checked the alarm system. "Your vision created something extraordinary tonight." She turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, his tie loosened, jacket slung over one arm. The casual pose did nothing to diminish his magnetic presence. "I thought you'd left," she said, suddenly aware they were alone in the dimly lit gallery, without saying goodbye. He pushed away from the door, moving toward her with the fluid grace of a predator. "That would be unforgivably rude." Niara held her ground as he approached, refusing to show how his proximity affected her. "Well, thank you for coming, and for your company's generous sponsorship. Will you have dinner with me tomorrow?" The directness of his question took her by surprise. "There's a little place in the West End that makes a bouillabaisse that will change your life." "I don't date collectors," she said automatically, the lie slipping out as a defense mechanism. Mateo smiled slowly. "Then it's fortunate I haven't purchased anything. Yet." His eyes held hers, challenging and warm at once. "Say, yes, Niara." The way he said her name, like he was tasting it, sent a shiver down her spine. "I'll think about it," she conceded. His smile widened as he backed toward the door. "I'll take that as a promising start." After he left, Niara leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. Her phone pinged with a text notification, unknown number. "I will be with you tonight. Dress less. If you can control yourself, I will propose to you tomorrow." Her breath caught. The audacity, the arrogance, The electricity that shot through her body at his words. She should be offended. She should block the number immediately. Instead, her fingers hovered over the screen, a smile tugging at her lips as she debated her response to the mysterious man who had somehow slipped past her defenses in a single afternoon. Niara stood before her full-length mirror, smoothing her hands over the crimson silk that clung to her curves like a lover's caress. The dress was daring, a plunging neckline, a slit that revealed a tantalizing glimpse of thigh, and a back that dipped dangerously low. It wasn't her usual style, but something about Mateo Cruz made her want to take risks. After his bold text message last night, she'd waited 2 hours before responding with the simple address and time. Playing it cool when her heart raced at the mere thought of seeing him again felt ridiculous, but her past had taught her caution. Her phone chimed with a text. "Downstairs. Take your time." She smiled at his presumption that she'd need more time, then grabbed her clutch and headed for the door. Let him see that Niara Bellamy wasn't predictable. When the elevator doors opened to the lobby, she saw him immediately. A striking figure in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, leaning against a pillar with casual elegance. The moment his eyes found her, his entire body tensed. His gaze traveled slowly from her face, down the length of her body, lingering on the exposed skin of her thigh, where the dress parted, before returning to meet her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're trying to kill me," he said, his voice a low rumble as she approached. Niara allowed herself a small smile. "If that was my intention, you wouldn't see it coming," he laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "I don't doubt it." He offered his arm. "Our reservation awaits, though suddenly I'm finding myself less interested in food." The restaurant was intimate and exclusive, a hidden gem with only 12 tables, each separated from the others by strategic architecture and lush greenery that created the illusion of dining in a private garden. A single candle illuminated their secluded corner, casting golden light across Mateo's sharp features. "You're staring," he noted as he poured her a glass of wine, a rare vintage that the sommelier had produced with reverent hands. "I'm trying to figure you out," Niara admitted, taking a sip. The wine was exquisite, notes of blackberry and cedar dancing across her tongue. "Ask me anything," he offered, leaning back in his chair with casual confidence that both irritated and attracted her. "I'm an open book." "Somehow I doubt that." She tilted her head. "What do you collect, besides phone numbers?" His smile flashed white in the dimness. Contemporary art primarily, African and Latin American artists, first editions of magical realism novels, and memories of beautiful moments. His eyes held hers. "Like this one." Throughout dinner, they circled each other with words. Niara deflecting his more personal questions, Mateo revealing just enough about himself to intrigue without truly exposing anything. He spoke of travels to remote galleries, of growing up between two cultures, of his passion for supporting emerging artists. Yet each revelation felt carefully curated, as if offering glimpses through strategically placed windows into a house, whose floor plan remained mysterious. "You haven't touched your dessert," he noted, as she toyed with the delicate chocolate creation before her. "I'm distracted," she admitted. "By?" "The question of why a man like you is pursuing a woman like me with such intensity." She met his gaze directly. "We barely know each other." Mateo leaned forward, the candlelight casting shadows that emphasized the sharp angles of his face. "Sometimes recognition doesn't require time." His voice dropped lower. "Sometimes it's immediate, visceral, like looking at great art. You don't need hours to know when something moves you." He reached across the table, his fingers grazing her wrist. The simple touch sent heat spiraling through her body. "I wanted you the moment I saw you, standing in that gallery like you owned every inch of it, but desire is common." His thumb stroked the sensitive skin of her inner wrist. What's rare is finding someone who makes you curious about more than what's beneath their clothes. Niara withdrew her hand, needing distance from the intoxicating effect of his touch. Smooth words from a practiced charmer. Not practiced with anyone who mattered. The rawness in his voice surprised her. Before she could respond, their server approached with the check. Matteo handled the transaction with casual efficiency, never taking his eyes off her face. As they stepped outside, the evening's warm air had vanished, replaced by the electric atmosphere that preceded a summer storm. Dark clouds had gathered, blotting out the stars. "My driver can take you home," Matteo offered, gesturing to a sleek black car waiting at the curb. "I think I'll walk," Niara decided impulsively. "My apartment's only a few blocks away. Then I'll walk with you." It wasn't a question. They had barely made it a block when the skies opened. Rain fell in heavy sheets, instantly soaking them. Lightning flashed, illuminating Matteo's face as he grabbed her hand. "This way!" He pulled her toward the recessed doorway of a closed boutique, the small overhang offering minimal shelter from the downpour. Pressed together in the narrow space, Niara became acutely aware of his body, the solid wall of his chest against her back, his breath warm on her neck. She turned to face him, intending to suggest they make a run for it, but the words died in her throat. Matteo was looking at her with naked hunger, his usual composure fractured by desire. Rain dripped from his hair onto his face, tracing paths down his cheeks like tears. Without conscious thought, she reached up to brush a droplet from his lower lip. His control snapped. In one fluid motion, he pressed her against the door, his mouth claiming hers with a passion that bordered on desperation. The kiss was nothing like the careful dance of their dinner conversation. This was raw, primal, honest. His tongue swept into her mouth as his hands tangled in her now damp hair, cradling her head as if she were something precious, even as he devoured her. Niara responded with equal fervor, her fingers digging into his shoulders, her body arching into his. The thin silk of her dress, now soaked through, was barely a barrier between them. She could feel every hard plane of his body, including the unmistakable evidence of his arousal pressed against her stomach. When they finally broke apart, both, gasping for breath, lightning flashed again, illuminating the dazed hunger in his eyes. "Come home with me," he murmured against her lips, his voice rough with need. The invitation sent heat pooling low in her belly, but some last vestige of self-preservation made Niara shake her head. "I don't fall easily," she warned him, even as her body screamed at her to reconsider. His hands framed her face with surprising tenderness. "I'm not asking you to fall," he said softly. "I'm asking you to fly with me." The poetry of his words nearly undid her resolve. Instead, she pressed one last, lingering kiss to his lips before gently extricating herself from his embrace. "Good night, Matteo," she whispered, stepping back into the rain. As she walked away, the cool drops a stark contrast to the fire he had ignited within her. Niara knew with bone-deep certainty that whatever game they were playing had just become infinitely more dangerous, and she was no longer sure she wanted to win. Chapter 3. Testing Boundaries. 3 days had passed since the kiss in the rain, and Niara couldn't stop replaying it in her mind. The memory haunted her dreams and distracted her during meetings. Matteo had texted her each day, nothing demanding, just thoughtful messages that revealed his continuing interest without pressuring her for a response. Today's text was different. "I respect your hesitation, but I'm not a patient man. Either tell me to stop pursuing you or see me again." The directness sent a thrill through her. Niara's fingers hovered over her phone as she debated her response. Logic told her to end it now, before she got in too deep with a man who clearly had the power to hurt her. But her body, her heart, they craved his presence like an addiction. Before she could overthink it, she typed, There's an immersive art installation opening tonight at the Warehouse District, 8 p.m. I have 2 tickets if you're interested. His response was immediate. I'll pick you up at 7:30. The Sensory Collective converted an abandoned textile factory into this installation, Niara explained as they approached the massive brick building. Soft light glowed from its windows, and a line of eager art enthusiasts wrapped around the corner. They explore the relationship between physical sensation and emotional response. Matteo's hand rested lightly on the small of her back. As they bypassed the line, Niara's curator credentials granting them immediate access. His touch, even through the fabric of her blouse, sent warmth spreading across her skin. Physical sensation and emotional response, he repeated thoughtfully. Appropriate. Inside, the cavernous space had been transformed into a labyrinth of fabric partitions, mirrors, and light projections. The first installation featured hundreds of silk ribbons hanging from the ceiling, forcing visitors to push through them to proceed. After you, Matteo gestured. Niara stepped forward, the cool silk caressing her face and arms as she moved. She heard Matteo's intake of breath behind her, felt him close enough that his body heat radiated against her back. When they emerged from the forest of ribbons, his eyes had darkened. "Interesting way to begin," he said, his voice husky. The next space contained a room where the floor was covered in deep, soft material that sank beneath their feet, making each step an effort that required balance. And often, Matteo's steadying hand. "The artist wants us to feel the labor of movement," Niara explained, hyper-aware of his fingers wrapped around her elbow. "How we take stability for granted." "I've taken nothing about you for granted," he murmured, so close that his breath tickled her ear. They moved through chambers of light and shadow, installations that played with temperature and sound. In one room, whispered confessions from anonymous contributors echoed from hidden speakers, creating an intimate atmosphere that made conversation seem like an intrusion. In another, projected images of intertwined bodies, artistic, not pornographic, but unmistakably sensual, danced across walls and ceilings. Throughout it all, Matteo maintained some point of contact with her, a hand at her waist, fingers intertwined with hers, his shoulder brushing against hers. Each touch was a silent conversation, a promise of what could happen if she allowed it. In a particularly dark corridor, he leaned down to whisper, "Do you know what I'm thinking right now?" Niara swallowed hard. "I can guess." His laugh was low and heated. "I'm thinking about how your skin would feel against mine, without barriers." His fingers traced a path from her wrist to her elbow. "I'm thinking about the sounds you'd make if I kissed you here." His lips brushed against the sensitive spot just below her ear, making her gasp. And here, another feather-light kiss at the junction of her neck and shoulder. Niara's pulse raced as they entered the final chamber, a small, secluded space with walls that seemed to absorb sound, creating a bubble of privacy. Video projections of gentle rain fell on every surface, reminiscent of their kiss days earlier. She turned to face him, finding his expression intent, hungry. "Is this your doing?" she asked, gesturing to the rain imagery. "I wish I could take credit for such perfect timing," he said, moving closer until she backed against the wall. "But I'm certainly going to take advantage of it." When he kissed her, this time it wasn't the desperate passion of their first encounter. This was slower, deeper, more deliberate, as if he was memorizing her taste, learning the particular angle that made her moan softly into his mouth. His hands remained carefully placed at her waist, even as hers explored the broad expanse of his shoulders, the firm muscles of his back. Emboldened by the semi-privacy, Niara let her hands slide lower, reveling in his sharp intake of breath as she traced the waistband of his pants. In response, his kiss became more demanding, his body pressing hers more firmly against the wall. One of his hands found its way beneath her blouse, his palm hot against the bare skin of her stomach. "We should go somewhere more private," he murmured against her neck, where he was placing a line of kisses that made coherent thought increasingly difficult. The suggestion broke through the haze of desire. Niara placed her hands on his chest, gently pushing him back to create enough space for her to think clearly. "Is that all this is?" she asked, searching his face in the dim, rainy light. "Physical attraction?" Matteo looked genuinely puzzled. "Of course not." "Then prove it to me," she challenged, though it took all her willpower not to pull him back against her. "Prove to me that you want more than my body." Something shifted in his expression, frustration mingled with admiration. "You think I'm just looking for a conquest, are you?" "No." He traced the curve of her cheek with one finger. "But I'm not going to pretend I don't want you. That would be a lie." "Sex is easy," Niara said quietly. "Vulnerability is harder." For a moment she thought he might argue, might try to persuade her with more kisses that would almost certainly erode her resolve. Instead, he stepped back, creating space between them that felt both necessary and painful. "You're right," he conceded, "and you deserve more than easy." He extended his hand to her, a different kind of invitation. "Have dinner with me tomorrow. No restaurants, no public settings. I'll cook for you at my place." When she hesitated, he added, "I promise to keep my hands to myself, mostly." The qualification made her smile, despite herself. "Just dinner?" "Just dinner," he confirmed. "And conversation. Real conversation." Niara studied him for a moment, then placed her hand in his. "I'll text you my food allergies." As they emerged from the installation into the cool night air, their hands remained linked. Niara knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, testing not just Matteo's boundaries, but her own carefully constructed defenses. "You know," Matteo said as he opened the car door for her, "when most women want to get to know a man better, they suggest coffee." Niara laughed, the tension between them momentarily lightening. "I'm not most women," his expression sobered as he looked at her. "No," he agreed softly. "You're definitely not." Chapter 4. Passionate Storm. "You're completely insane," Kessia declared, watching as Niara carefully folded a silk nightgown into her weekend bag. "You've known this man for what, 2 weeks? And you're going to his isolated beach house?" "It's hardly isolated," Niara countered, though she couldn't completely dismiss her friend's concern. "It's in a gated community with neighbors." "Rich neighbors who won't hear you screaming," Kezia muttered, flopping dramatically onto Niara's bed. "Have you at least sent me his address and a photo of his driver's license?" Niara rolled her eyes, but pulled out her phone and forwarded Matteo's information. After their dinner at his penthouse, where he had, true to his word, been a perfect gentleman despite the heated glances they'd exchanged, Matteo had suggested a weekend getaway. "The forecast calls for storms," he'd told her. "Perfect weather for watching the ocean rage from behind glass walls." The prospect terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "There," Niara said, showing Kezia the sent message, "if I disappear, you'll know where to find my body." Kezia wasn't amused. "This isn't like you, Ni. You're usually so cautious." "Maybe. That's the problem," Niara said softly, zipping her bag. "Maybe being cautious has kept me safe, but it's also kept me lonely." Her friend's expression softened. "Just promise me you'll call if anything feels off, and keep your phone charged." "Yes, Mother," Niara teased, but she was touched by the concern. "I'll check in daily." When Matteo's sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment building, Niara felt a flutter of nerves that had nothing to do with safety concerns. This weekend represented a turning point, one she wasn't entirely sure she was ready for. The beach house was breathtaking. A modern structure of glass and weathered wood perched on stilts above the dunes, offering panoramic views of the Atlantic. Floor-to-ceiling windows dominated the open-concept living area, bringing the dramatic seascape inside. Dark clouds already gathered on the horizon, promising the storm Matteo had predicted. "This is—" Niara struggled to find adequate words as she set her bag down. "A bit much?" Matteo suggested, looking almost self-conscious. "My father believes in conspicuous displays of wealth. I prefer my apartment in the city, but the ocean view here is unparalleled." It was the first time he'd mentioned his father, and Niara filed the information away, noting the hint of tension in his voice. "It's beautiful," she said honestly, "though I'm now regretting my public school teacher's salary." That made him laugh, as he carried her bag toward one of several doors off the main living area. "You have your own room," he told her, pushing open the door to reveal a spacious bedroom with its own ocean view. No presumptions. The consideration touched her. "Thank you." "I'll give you some time to settle in," he said, his eyes lingering on her face before he turned away. "I thought I'd cook dinner, if that's all right." "You cook?" Niara raised an eyebrow, following him back to the main room. "Don't sound so surprised." He moved to the gleaming kitchen with easy familiarity. "My mother believed every child should know how to feed themselves properly. She refused to let my father hire a chef until I could prepare a 3-course meal on my own." The casual revelation of privilege made Niara acutely aware of their different backgrounds. "My mother taught me to cook too," she offered, "though it was less about life skills and more about necessity." Matteo nodded, understanding in his eyes as he rolled up his shirt sleeves. "Tell me about her." And somehow, the simple question opened a floodgate. As Matteo moved around the kitchen with unexpected grace, Niara found herself sharing stories of her childhood in Baltimore. Her mother's determination to give her every opportunity, her father's absence, the art teacher who'd recognized her, eye for composition and encouraged her to pursue museum studies. "Your turn," she said eventually, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "Fair exchange." Something flickered in his eyes, hesitation perhaps, before he nodded. "My mother was Colombian, my father American. They met when he was expanding his business interests in Bogota. His knife moved with practiced precision as he diced vegetables. They had what you might call a complicated relationship. She loved him, I think, but she never fully adapted to his world." "And yet she stayed," Niara observed. "For me," Matteo confirmed, his expression somber, "she wanted me to have opportunities she never had." There was more to the story. Niara could sense it in the careful way he chose his words. But before she could probe deeper, a flash of lightning illuminated the darkening sky, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder. "Perfect timing," Matteo said, his expression clearing. "Dinner's ready just as the show begins." They ate on the covered deck, watching as the storm rolled in from the ocean. Massive clouds tinged purple and silver, lightning forking across the sky in spectacular displays. The air turned electric, heavy with the scent of rain and salt. "It's magnificent," Niara breathed, mesmerized by nature's raw power. "Yes." But when she turned, she found Matteo watching her instead of the storm, his eyes dark with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Magnificent." The first fat raindrops began to fall as they cleared their plates, quickly becoming a downpour that drove them inside. They stood before the glass wall, watching as sheets of rain obscured the view, lightning periodically illuminating the churning ocean below. "I've always loved storms," Niara admitted, wrapping her arms around herself. "The power of them, the reminder that we're small in the face of nature's fury." Matteo moved behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, but not quite touching. "Is that why you came this weekend? To feel small?" She turned to face him, suddenly aware of how alone they were, surrounded by rain and darkness. "I came because when I'm with you, I feel awake, like I've been sleepwalking and suddenly my senses are heightened. Lightning flashed, illuminating the naked desire in his eyes. "Niara, I know what I said about proving you want more than my body," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face. "But right now, I need you to show me how much you want it." His control, so carefully maintained since their encounter at the art installation, snapped. In one fluid motion, he pulled her against him, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that matched the storm raging outside. Niara met his passion with her own, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressing closer as if trying to eliminate any space between them. They barely made it to his bedroom, shedding clothes along the way. When they finally fell onto his bed, the only light came from flashes of lightning through the windows, casting their bodies in stark relief against the shadows. Matteo took his time, his hands and mouth exploring her body with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes. When they finally became one, Niara gasped at the intensity of the connection, not just physical but something deeper, as if some essential part of her soul recognized him. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets as rain continued to pound against the windows, Niara's head resting on Matteo's chest, where she could hear the steady rhythm of his heart. "I've never felt like this," he confessed into the darkness, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "Not with anyone." The raw honesty in his voice made Niara raise her head to look at him. Like what? His eyes, when they met hers, contained a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. Like, "I want to tell you everything. Like I could trust you with." And parts of myself I've always kept hidden. The admission should have pleased her. Wasn't this what she'd asked for? Proof that he wanted more than her body. Instead, it awakened a strange unease. What secrets was Matteo Cruz hiding? "Then tell me," she challenged gently, tracing the line of his jaw. "Tell me what you've kept hidden." For a moment, she thought he might. Something passed across his face, a shadow of indecision. Then he smiled, rolling her beneath him once more. "Later," he promised, his lips finding her neck. "Right now, I want to hear you say my name again, the way you did when you came apart in my arms." And as his hands rekindled the fire in her blood, Niara let herself be distracted from the questions that lingered just beyond the passion of the moment. Questions about the man whose body was now so familiar, but whose heart remained a mystery. 3 weeks had passed since the beach house, and Niara found herself falling into a rhythm with Matteo that both thrilled and terrified her. Nights spent in each other's arms, mornings waking to his sleepy smile, evenings filled with conversations that stretched until dawn. He'd become a fixture in her life with startling speed. Yet there remained parts of him she couldn't access. Phone. Calls he took in private, vague references to family business that he never elaborated on. A certain guardedness whenever she asked about his past relationships. "You're overthinking," Kessia told her over lunch. "The man is clearly crazy about you. Does it matter that he doesn't share every detail of his life?" "It shouldn't," Niara admitted, stirring her iced tea absently. "But I can't shake the feeling he's keeping something significant from me." Kessia studied her friend's face. "You're falling in love with him." The observation, stated so plainly, made Niara's chest tighten. "I might be," she conceded, "and that's exactly why his secrets matter." That evening, Niara stood amid the buzzing crowd at the Kingsley Gallery's new exhibition opening. As a professional courtesy, the gallery director had invited her, and Matteo had readily agreed to accompany her. But an emergency call had delayed him, leaving Niara to navigate the event alone for the first hour. She was examining a particularly striking sculpture when a voice behind her made her freeze. The artist's earlier work was far more innovative. This feels derivative. Niara turned to find herself face to face with one of the most beautiful women she'd ever seen. Tall and willowy, with honey gold skin and a cascade of dark hair, the woman exuded effortless elegance in a dress that probably cost more than Niara's monthly rent. "I disagree," Niara replied, professional instincts kicking in. There's a maturity in the execution that suggests evolution rather than repetition. The woman's perfectly arched eyebrow rose slightly. A curator's perspective, she noted. You must be Niara. The fact that this stranger knew her name sent a chill through Niara's body. And you are? Solana Vega. The woman extended a manicured hand. An old friend of Mateo's. The emphasis on friend carried undertones that made Niara's stomach clench. Before she could respond, a familiar warm hand settled on the small of her back. Solana? Mateo's voice held a tension Niara had never heard before. I didn't expect to see you here. Clearly, Solana replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I was just getting acquainted with your latest interest. The slight pause made the word sound dismissive, temporary. Niara felt heat rise to her cheeks. Niara is my partner, Mateo said firmly, his arm sliding around her waist in a gesture that seemed as much possessive as affectionate. Not an interest. Solana's laugh was musical but laced with something sharper. Of course. Forgive me. She touched Mateo's arm with casual intimacy. We should catch up soon. Your father was asking about you at the foundation dinner last week. My father knows how to reach me, Mateo replied coldly. Does he? Solana's gaze flickered to Niara. It was lovely meeting you. I'm sure we'll see each other again. As she glided away, Niara turned to Mateo. Who is she really? Let's not do this here, he murmured, glancing around at the crowded gallery. Then let's leave, Niara suggested, already reaching for her clutch. The emotional temperature between them had dropped several degrees, the evening irrevocably altered by Solana's appearance. The ride to Niara's apartment passed in tense silence. It wasn't until they were behind closed doors that she turned to face him, arms crossed defensively across her chest. You slept with her? It wasn't a question, but Mateo answered anyway. Yes, a long time ago. How long? Niara. How? Long? He exhaled slowly. We ended things 8 months ago. The confirmation sent a wave of jealousy through her so intense it was almost nauseating. Niara moved to her kitchen, needing distance, needing to occupy her hands before they betrayed her by shaking. She's still in love with you, she said, filling a glass with water she didn't actually want. Solana doesn't love anyone except herself, Mateo replied, following her, and possibly my father's money. Your father? Niara turned, confused. What does your father have to do with your ex-girlfriend? Mateo leaned against the counter, suddenly looking exhausted. Solana is the daughter of my father's business partner. Our relationship was encouraged. Arranged, you mean? Niara clarified, pieces falling into place. Your families wanted you together. My father did, Mateo corrected. And her family saw advantages in the connection. But it wasn't real, Niara. Not like... He gestured between them. Not like this. Yet you never mentioned her, not once in all our conversations. Because she doesn't matter. She clearly matters to your family. The words hung between them, exposing the real issue with painful clarity. Niara set down her glass with deliberate control. You haven't told them about me, have you? Mateo's silence was answer enough. Are you ashamed of me? The question came, out smaller than she intended, vulnerability bleeding through her anger. God, no. He moved toward her but stopped when she held up a hand. It's complicated, Niara. My father has expectations. He doesn't respond well when those expectations are challenged. Because I'm black? She forced herself to say it directly, to name the elephant that had suddenly materialized in the room. Because you're not who he chose, Mateo corrected, but his hesitation told her there was truth in her question. My father is a controlling man who believes he knows what's best for everyone, especially me, and what's best for you is apparently not a black woman with a modest income who works in the arts. Matteo ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "You're putting words in my mouth." "I'm reading between the lines," Niara countered. "Have you even told your family I exist?" His silence was damning. "That's what I thought." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. "I think you should go. Niara, please." He reached for her, his eyes pleading. "There are things about my family you don't understand, because you've never told me." The dam broke. Weeks of accumulated questions spilling out. "You keep so much of yourself locked away, Matteo. You share your body, even parts of your heart, but never the whole truth. How am I supposed to trust what we're building when I sense there's so much you're hiding?" Something shifted in his expression. Resignation, perhaps, or recognition that the moment of reckoning had arrived sooner than he'd planned. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've kept parts of myself from you, not because I don't trust you, but because I've never shared them with anyone." The vulnerability in his admission pulled at her heart, even through her anger. Wordlessly, she moved to the living room and sat on the couch, a silent invitation for him to continue. For the next hour, Matteo spoke without interruption, revealing the complicated web of his family life. His father's emotional manipulation, the broken engagement to Solana that had been announced in financial papers before he'd even proposed. His mother's slow surrender of her identity to fit his father's world, and her eventual return to Colombia after their divorce, heartbroken and diminished. "I watched my mother lose herself trying to meet my father's expectations," Matteo said, his voice rough with emotion. "I swore I'd never let anyone I cared about go through that." "Is that why you ended things with Solana?" Niara asked. "I ended things with Solana because I didn't love her," he answered simply, "and because I was tired of living my life according to my father's blueprint." He moved to sit beside her, careful to maintain a small space between them. "I haven't told my family about you because I'm trying to protect you from them, not because I'm ashamed, but I realize now that my silence looks like something else entirely. It looks like you don't see a future for us," Niara said softly. Matteo's eyes, when they met hers, were filled with an emotion that made her breath catch. "I see nothing but future when I look at you, Niara. That's what terrifies me." The honesty broke through some of her defenses. "Tell me about the engagement," she requested, needing to understand the full picture. "Were you in love with her?" "No," he stated firmly. "It was a business arrangement dressed up as a romance. I agreed to it because—" He hesitated. "Because at the time, I believed it was easier to go along with my father's plans than to fight them. It took watching Solana plan our life with the same cold calculation my father uses in business deals to wake me up." Niara absorbed this, remembering the proprietary way Solana had touched Matteo's arm. "She still thinks she has a claim on you. She thinks she has a claim on my family's name and fortune," he corrected. "Solana doesn't know the first thing about me, what I want, what matters to me." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "Not like you do." The sincerity in his voice melted more of her anger, but concerns still lingered. "Your father won't accept me easily." "Probably not," Matteo acknowledged. "But I'm not asking him to. I'm asking you to accept me, all of me, including the complicated family I'm trying to disentangle myself from." He cupped her face gently. "I'm falling in love with you, Niara. That terrifies me and exhilarates me in equal measure. But I promise you this, I will never hide you, never be ashamed of you, and never ask you to be less than exactly who you are." The declaration stripped away her remaining defenses. When he kissed her, she tasted the salt of tears, whether his or hers she couldn't tell. Their lovemaking that night had a desperate edge, as if both were trying to reclaim something they'd feared losing, to banish the shadows Solana's appearance had cast. Afterward, curled against his chest, Niara felt the shifting of their relationship. into something deeper, more honest, but also more vulnerable. They had crossed a threshold tonight, exposing wounds and fears they'd previously kept hidden. Only later, drifting towards sleep, did a small voice in her mind whisper that despite everything Matteo had shared, she still sensed he was holding something. You back, something perhaps even more significant than what he'd revealed. Chapter 6, Surrender. Tell me again why I agreed to this, Niara asked as Matteo's luxury SUV climbed the winding mountain road, dense forest, pressing in on either side. Because you can't resist my charm, Matteo replied with a grin, reaching across to squeeze her hand. And because I promised you a weekend, with no interruptions, no gallery openings, no family drama, and no phone calls. It had been 2 weeks since the night Solana appeared, 2 weeks of Matteo gradually opening up about his complicated family dynamics. Though the shadow of his revelation, that his father would likely disapprove of their relationship, hung between them, they'd reached a tentative new understanding. When Matteo suggested they escape to his family's mountain cabin, Niara had hesitated. Another luxury property where you've hosted other women, she'd asked, unable to completely banish the image of Solana from her mind. Actually, no, he'd answered with surprising seriousness. I've never taken anyone there. It's my personal retreat, the one place my father doesn't intrude. That admission had been enough to convince her. Now, as the SUV rounded the final curve, the cabin came into view. Unlike the modernist glass showcase of the beach house, this structure was rustic and intimate, rough-hewn timber and stone with a wide porch wrapped around 3 sides. Smoke curled from the chimney despite the early autumn warmth. Someone's here? Niara asked, tensing slightly. Just the caretaker, Matteo assured her. He comes up ahead of my visits to air the place out and stock the kitchen. He'll be gone before we reach the door. True to his word, as they pulled into the graveled driveway, an older man in flannel emerged from the cabin, touched his cap in greeting, then climbed into a weathered pickup and drove away. Matteo carried their bags inside, while Niara explored. The interior was a surprise. Where she'd expected opulent luxury, she found thoughtful comfort. A massive stone fireplace dominated the main room, flanked by deep leather couches strewn with soft blankets. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a stunning vista of mountains rolling away to the horizon. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled not with showy art books, but well-worn paperbacks and hardcovers with cracked spines. This isn't what I expected, she admitted, running her fingers along the book spines. Many were in Spanish. Novels, poetry collections, memoirs. My mother's books, Matteo explained, coming to stand beside her. She loved this place, said it, reminded her of her grandmother's home in the Colombian highlands. Niara pulled out a volume of poetry, opening to find a feminine script in the margins. She wrote in them. She lived in them, Matteo corrected gently, taking the book and reading one of the annotations in fluid Spanish before translating, "The heart recognizes what the mind refuses to see. She wrote that the summer before she left my father." He replaced the book carefully. I come here when I need to remember who I am beneath the expectations and the family name. The revelation, this glimpse into the private Matteo beneath the polished exterior, touched Niara deeply. She reached for him, pulling his face down to hers for a tender kiss. "Thank you for sharing this with me," she whispered against his lips. His response was to deepen the kiss, his hands sliding beneath her sweater to find warm skin. They stumbled toward the bedroom, shedding clothes along the way. But just as they reached the door, Matteo pulled back. "Wait," he said, breathing heavily. "Let me show you something first." Taking her hand, he led her, both of them half-dressed and flushed, through the cabin to the back porch. There, built into the deck, was a steaming hot tub, positioned to maximize the panoramic mountain view. "Oh," Niara breathed, imagining the stars reflected in its surface at night. "I thought we might christen it later," Matteo suggested, his eyes darkening as they roamed over her body, clad now only in lacy undergarments. "Why wait?" Niara challenged, reaching behind to unclasp her bra. His sharp intake of breath was gratifying. In one fluid motion, she shed her remaining clothes and stepped into the steaming water, holding his gaze the entire time. "Coming?" Matteo didn't need to be asked twice. Later, as afternoon faded toward evening, they lay tangled on a bearskin rug before the fireplace. Niara's head pillowed on Matteo's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare back. "I could get used to this," she murmured, watching flames dance in the stone hearth. "The cabin or me?" he teased, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Both. The simple admission hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither had fully voiced. Niara felt him tense slightly beneath her cheek. "What?" she asked, raising her head to look at him. "Nothing," he said quickly, too quickly. Niara sat up, pulling the throw blanket around her naked body. "Don't do that. Don't retreat when we're getting closer." Matteo sighed, pushing himself up to lean against the couch. The firelight played across his muscled torso, highlighting the contours that Niara's hands and mouth had memorized hours earlier. "I was thinking about what it would mean. You getting used to this. To me." His eyes, when they met hers, contained a vulnerability she rarely glimpsed. "About what I want that to mean, which is everything." The word emerged rough with emotion. "I want everything with you, Niara, and that scares the hell out of me." Her heart raced at the admission, but she kept her expression calm. "Why does it scare you?" "Because I've never felt this way before." He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Because I've spent years keeping people at a careful distance, and in just a few months you've somehow slipped past every defense." Is that so terrible?" she asked softly. "It's terrifying," he corrected. "I look at you and see possibilities I never allowed myself to imagine. A life where I'm truly happy, not just going through the motions." He pulled her closer, cradling her face in his hands. "I've had sex before, but I've never made love until you. I've spoken words of affection, but they were empty until I whispered them against your skin." The raw honesty in his voice made Niara's eyes sting with unshed tears. "Matteo." "I love you," he said. The declaration simple but profound in the fire-lit quiet. "I know it's fast. I know we're still learning each other, but I love you, Niara Bellamy, in a way I didn't believe existed outside of my mother's poetry books." The words unlocked something in Niara's chest, a tight, protected place she'd guarded since her last heartbreak. Tears spilled over as she leaned into his touch. "I love you too," she whispered, "and it terrifies me just as much." His kiss was tender, reverent, so different from the heated passion they'd shared in the hot tub. When he lowered her back to the rug, his movements were slow, deliberate, as if he meant to cherish rather than possess. "Let me show you," he murmured against her throat. "Let me show you what you mean to me." And he did, with his hands, his mouth, his body moving with hers in perfect rhythm. Where their earlier lovemaking had been urgent and primal, this was transcendent, a communion of souls as much as bodies. When release came, it washed over Niara in waves, Matteo's name on her lips like a prayer. The weekend unfolded in a dreamlike haze. Mornings spent tangled in sheets, afternoons exploring the surrounding woods hand in hand, evenings cooking. Together in the rustic kitchen, they made love everywhere, against the floor-to-ceiling windows with the mountains as witness, in the hot tub under a canopy of stars, on the kitchen counter amid the remnants of a midnight snack. But it was the quiet moments that truly marked the evolution of their relationship. Matteo reading aloud from his mother's books, translating the Spanish poetry into English with passionate inflection. Niara sketching his profile as he dozed in. A patch of sunlight, Conversations that meandered from childhood memories to philosophical debates about art's purpose, neither of them checking the time or reaching for phones. On their final evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Niara felt a sense of peace she'd never known. "I don't want to go back," she admitted, leaning into Matteo's embrace. "We don't have to," he suggested, only half joking. "We could become mountain hermits, live off the land, make love under the stars every night." She laughed, turning to kiss him. "Somehow I don't see you chopping wood and hunting deer. You underestimate me," he protested with mock offense. "I'm very capable." "Oh, I'm well aware of your capabilities," she teased, letting her hand wander suggestively along his thigh. His eyes darkened with familiar desire, but there was something else there too, a tenderness that made her chest ache. "When we go back," he said carefully, "things will be more complicated. Because of your father, partly." Matteo hesitated. "He'll find out about us eventually, especially if Solana decides to be spiteful. And he won't react well." Niara sighed, the perfect bubble of their weekend showing. "It's first signs of fragility. I won't be your secret, Matteo." "I would never ask you to be," he assured her, pulling her closer. "I just want you to be prepared. My father can be vindictive when he's displeased." "And you think he'll be displeased about me?" Matteo's silence was answer enough. "Because of my race," Niara stated flatly. "Among other things," Matteo admitted reluctantly. "He has very specific ideas about suitable matches for the crew's name. But I need you to know something." He turned her to face him fully. "His opinion means nothing to me. You are what I want, Niara. Only you." The conviction in his voice soothed her fears, at least temporarily. Whatever challenges awaited them, beyond this mountain retreat, they would face them together. That night, as moonlight spilled across the bed where they lay entwined, Niara finally spoke the words that had been building in her heart throughout the weekend. "I'm falling in love with you," she whispered against his shoulder. "Not the surface version, the charming, successful man everyone sees. I'm falling in love with this Matteo, the one who reads poetry and makes breakfast barefoot and looks at me like I'm the most precious thing he's ever seen." Tears glistened in his eyes as he gathered her closer. "That's the only Matteo that matters," he promised, "and he's yours, completely." As they made love one last time in the moonlit bedroom, Niara felt herself surrendering the final pieces of her heart she'd kept in reserve. For better or worse, her soul had recognized its match in Matteo Cruz, and there was no going back now, only forward, together, into whatever awaited them beyond the sanctuary of their mountain hideaway. Chapter 7. The Proposal. "I need you to clear your schedule this evening." Matteo's voice came through Niara's phone, a mixture of excitement and nervousness she'd never heard before. "Oh." She shifted her phone to her other ear as she hung a painting for the upcoming exhibition. "And why is that?" "It's a surprise." "I don't like surprises," Niara reminded him, though they both knew it wasn't true. Their 2 months together had been filled with small surprises. Flowers delivered to her office, spontaneous weekends away, midnight picnics on her apartment rooftop. "You'll like this one," he promised. 7 o'clock. Wear something that makes you feel beautiful." After they hung up, Niara found herself smiling at the empty gallery. Since their mountain retreat 3 weeks ago, their relationship had shifted into something deeper, more certain. Matteo had begun mentioning our future in casual conversation, as if it were already decided. And despite her usual caution, Niara was allowing herself to imagine it too. When Kessia called to ask about lunch, Niara found herself confessing her suspicions about the evening. "You think he's going to propose?" Kessia squealed, loud enough that Niara had to hold the phone away from her ear. "It's possible," Niara admitted, "though it seems fast." "Fast, girl. When it's right, and the way that man looks at you—" Kessia made a sound of approval. "That's the real thing." Despite her attempt to remain practical, Niara felt a flutter of anticipation as she dressed that evening, choosing a golden silk dress that complemented her dark skin and brought out amber highlights in her eyes. Her breath caught when she opened her door to find Matteo waiting, devastatingly handsome in a tailored suit, his eyes darkening with appreciation as they swept over her. "You're perfect," he murmured, pulling her close for a kiss that promised more later. When they arrived at the Meridian Gallery, the same one where they'd first met, Niara raised an eyebrow. "Work? Your surprise is work?" Matteo smiled mysteriously, guiding her to the entrance where the gallery owner waited, despite the closed sign hanging on the door. "Ms. Bellamy," the older woman greeted her warmly. "Everything is ready, Mr. Cruz." Confusion mounting, Niara allowed Matteo to lead her into the darkened gallery. As they moved through the entryway, soft lighting gradually illuminated the main exhibition space, and Niara froze. The walls were covered with paintings, dozens of them, all of her. Niara laughing over dinner. Niara reading on his couch, her face in profile. Niara sleeping, the sheets draped artfully over her nude form. Niara gazing out at the ocean from the beach house porch. Each one captured a moment of their time together with stunning detail and emotion. "Matteo," she whispered, moving closer to examine a particularly intimate portrait. Her face in the throes of passion, eyes half closed, lips parted. Despite the sensuality, it was handled with such tenderness that it felt like an act of devotion rather than exposure. "Who painted these?" "I did." His admission made her turn to stare at him in shock. "Art was my first love, before business school and family. Expectations. I've drawn you since the first night we met. I couldn't help myself." Niara moved from canvas to canvas, seeing herself through his eyes. Beautiful, passionate, strong, vulnerable. Tears welled up as she realized the depth of his attention, how completely he'd seen and cherished every facet of her. "These are extraordinary," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "You're extraordinary," he countered softly. "You've awakened parts of me I thought were long dead." When she turned to face him, Niara's heart stopped. Matteo was down on one knee in the center of the gallery, holding a small velvet box. "I had a speech prepared," he began, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady, "about how you've changed my life, how I never knew love could feel like this." He shook his head, as if words were suddenly inadequate. "But what it comes down to is simple. I love you, Niara Bellamy. I love your brilliance, your passion, your strength. I love the way you challenge me, the way you see through my defenses to the man beneath." He opened the box to reveal a ring, not the massive diamond she might have expected, but a vintage piece, with a cushion-cut emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "The only woman in my family who married. For love and not advantage." Niara's hands trembled as he continued. "You've tested my patience, my desire, my heart," he said, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "Now let me prove that I want forever." For a moment Niara couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the magnitude of her feelings. Then, as if her body knew before her mind could catch up, she was nodding, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Matteo's face transformed with joy as he slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, lifting and spinning her as champagne corks popped somewhere in the background. Only then did Niara notice they weren't alone. Kessia was there, along with several of her closest friends and colleagues, all cheering and wiping away. "Tears, you planned all this," she accused through happy tears. "I had help," he admitted, nodding toward Kessia, who was already moving forward to admire the ring. The next few hours passed in a blur of celebration. Champagne flowing, friends offering congratulations, everyone admiring the paintings that would eventually be displayed in a private exhibition. I can't believe you kept this secret from me, Niara told Kezia as they embraced. Hardest thing I've ever done, her friend admitted, but worth it to see your face. Eventually, the crowd began to disperse, leaving just a few stragglers. Matteo was across the room, deep in conversation with the gallery owner about arrangements for the artworks. As Niara sipped the last of her champagne, she noticed him step away to take a phone call, his expression shifting from elation to something harder, more guarded. Curious, she drifted closer. "It needs to be handled this week," he was saying, his voice low and tense. "I want the final solution in place before any announcement goes public." A pause as he listened to the caller. "No, I'll end it once and for all. There can't be any lingering connections." Another pause. "Yes, I'll take care of it personally." The coldness in his tone sent a chill through Niara's body, so at odds with the passionate man who had just pledged his love. When he hung up and turned, the mask of celebration slipped back into place so quickly she almost doubted what she'd heard. "Ready to go, my love?" he asked, wrapping his arm around her waist. Niara forced a smile, the weight of the ring suddenly heavy on her finger. "Yes," she lied, wondering what exactly Matteo was planning to end once and for all, and why the timing coincided with their engagement. Later that night, as they made love in her apartment, Matteo worshipped her body with the same reverence captured in his paintings. But even as pleasure overtook her, a small voice in the back of Niara's mind whispered caution. For all his declarations of love and transparency, she sensed Matteo Cruz still harbored secrets that could shatter the beautiful future he'd promised her. Chapter 8. Devastating Truth. For 3 days, Niara tried to dismiss what she'd overheard. She examined the conversation from every angle, searching for innocent explanations. Perhaps it was a business matter, some contract or partnership Matteo was dissolving before announcing their engagement publicly. But the coldness in his voice, the secretive timing, it gnawed at her. Their engagement announcement had gone out in the society pages that morning, accompanied by a tasteful photo. Matteo had been attentive and loving, yet Niara noticed how he'd been constantly checking his phone, stepping away for private calls. "You're being paranoid," she told herself as she sat in her office, the emerald ring catching the light as she typed. But even as she tried to focus on work, Solana's knowing smile kept flashing through her mind. What if there was more to that relationship than Matteo had admitted? By evening, Niara could no longer bear the uncertainty. She left work early, intending to surprise Matteo at his penthouse. They hadn't planned to see each other until later. He'd mentioned a business dinner he couldn't reschedule. As her cab approached his building, Niara spotted a familiar figure exiting. Matteo, dressed impeccably in a suit she hadn't seen before. Her instinct was to call out, but something held her back as she watched him slide into the back of a waiting car. "Change of plans," she told the driver, instructing him to follow at a discreet distance. Self-disgust churned in her stomach. Was this who she'd become? A woman spying on her fiancé? But the memory of that cold phone conversation steeled her resolve. The car took them not to a restaurant, but to the Westmont Hotel, one of the city's most exclusive establishments. Through the cab window, Niara watched Matteo stride into the ornate lobby. "Wait here," she instructed the driver, passing him extra cash. "I won't be long." Inside, the hotel's elegant bar was dimly lit and half full. It took her only moments to spot Matteo, seated at a corner table with Solana and an older man whose resemblance to Matteo marked him unmistakably as his father. Niara froze, her engagement ring suddenly burning on her finger. Matteo hadn't mentioned seeing his father. In fact, he'd specifically said they weren't speaking since he'd refused to reconcile with Solana. She was about to retreat when Solana looked up, her perfect features registering first surprise, then a calculating satisfaction. She leaned over to whisper something to Matteo, whose head whipped around, his face draining of color as he spotted Niara. "Niara," he stood abruptly. "This isn't what?" she interrupted, approaching their table with forced calm. "Isn't a secret meeting with your ex and your father on the same night our engagement was announced? Because it looks exactly like that." The older man, Matteo's father, assessed her with cold eyes. "So this is the curator," he said, his accent faint but noticeable. He didn't stand or offer his hand. "You failed to mention certain details, Matteo." The implication was unmistakable, and Niara felt heat rise to her cheeks. Not embarrassment, but rage. "Yes, I'm black. How perceptive of you." Solana smirked into her martini, while Matteo looked stricken. "Father, Niara is my fiancée, a situation that can still be remedied," the older man cut in smoothly. "Nothing has been formally announced beyond those ridiculous society pages." "Actually, it has," Matteo countered, his jaw tight. "And nothing needs to be remedied. I love Niara. I'm going to marry her." "Don't be absurd." His father's voice remained calm, but took on a steely edge. "You have responsibilities to this family that go beyond your personal indulgences." The casual racism struck Niara like a physical blow. She'd suspected Matteo's father might disapprove, but to witness his contempt firsthand was another matter. "Entirely. I think I've seen enough," she said quietly, removing the emerald ring from her finger and placing it on the table. "Clearly you have family matters to discuss." "Niara, wait." Matteo reached for her, but she stepped back. "You lied to me," she stated flatly. "You said you weren't in contact with your father, that you'd made your choice. Yet here you are, conspiring with him and your ex-fiancée. Yes, Solana, I know about the engagement. Were you planning to end things once and for all with me tonight, Matteo? Was that the final solution you were discussing on the phone?" Pain and confusion crossed his face. "What? No, that's not—" "Save it," Niara interrupted. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I won't be a pawn in it." As she turned to leave, she caught Solana's triumphant expression and Matteo's father's calculating gaze. Whatever this was, family pressure, cultural expectations, or something more sinister, she wanted no part of it. Matteo caught up to her, in the hotel lobby, grabbing her arm. "Niara, please, it's not what you think." She wrenched free. "Then what is it? Explain to me why you're secretly meeting with your father and your ex while telling me you're at a business dinner." His expression was tormented. "I was going to end it, all of it. My father called, insisted on this meeting. He threatened to cut off funding to several arts organizations I know you care about if I didn't come." The explanation only deepened her anger. "So you decided to handle it yourself instead of telling me? Do you think I'm too fragile to know the truth? I was protecting you." "No," she countered. "You were protecting yourself from having to make a real choice." The pain in his eyes nearly broke her resolve, but Niara forced herself to continue. "I love you, Matteo. God help me, I still do. But I won't be with someone who keeps me separated from parts of his life, who lies about where he is and who he's with. Please," his voice cracked. "Come back to my place. Let me explain everything." Against her better judgment, Niara nodded. Too emotionally exhausted to continue the confrontation in public, Matteo dismissed his driver, joining her in the taxi. The ride to his penthouse passed in tense silence, both of them staring out separate windows at the city lights. Inside his apartment, Matteo poured them both a drink, his hands visibly shaking. Niara remained standing, unwilling to settle into comfortable domesticity. "Talk," she commanded. He took a deep breath. "My father discovered our engagement this morning and threatened to withdraw funding from the West Side Arts Initiative, which I know is crucial for your community outreach programs." Niara frowned. This was true, The initiative provided arts education to underprivileged children in her old neighborhood. He demanded I meet with him and Solana, Matteo continued. He wants me to reconcile with her, to maintain certain business arrangements between our families. And were you considering it? The question emerged barely above a whisper. No, Matteo looked genuinely shocked. Never. I was meeting them to make it clear, once and for all, that I'm choosing my own path. That I choose you. Then what was the final solution you mentioned on the phone? She pressed. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You overheard. Niara, I was talking to my lawyer. The final solution is legal separation from my family's business interests. I've been building my own portfolio for years, waiting for the right time to break away completely. He moved closer, taking her hands despite her resistance. The announcement wasn't our engagement. It was my intention to formally divest from Cruz Enterprises. I wanted everything in place before telling you, because my father will fight it and it could get ugly. Hope flickered in Niara's chest, but doubt still lingered. Why not tell me this? Why all the secrecy? Matteo's expression grew pained. Because I'm ashamed of them, of the way my father thinks, of the world I come from. I wanted to present you with a clean break, not drag you into this mess. He guided her to sit beside him on the couch. When my father discovered who you were, a black woman with no family connections he could exploit, he made his disapproval abundantly clear. His racism is deeply ingrained. Matteo's voice cracked. I thought I could handle him myself. Shield you from his ugliness. I was wrong to keep you in the dark. Niara absorbed his words, wanting desperately to believe him. So, tonight I told him I was marrying you regardless of his threats, and that I would be publicly separating my financial interests from the family business. Matteo ran, a hand through his hair. I didn't expect him to bring Solana. That was his last desperate attempt to change my mind. Relief began to replace Niara's anger, but a fundamental concern remained. How can we build a future when your own family won't accept me? The question emerged quiet, but firm. I won't spend my life being tolerated at family gatherings, watching my children face subtle prejudice from their grandfather. Pain flashed across Matteo's face. My father made his choice tonight, when I told him to either accept you or lose me. He chose the latter. He took her hands again, his grip almost desperate. I choose you, Niara. If that means creating a new family, separate from the one I was born into, then that's what we'll do. The sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable, yet Niara needed time to process everything. I believe you, she said finally, but I need space to think. Understanding and heartbreak warred in Matteo's expression as she removed her hands from his. I'm not ending things, she clarified, seeing his devastation, but I need to be sure this is right for both of us. She stood, retrieving her purse. Your father's reaction tonight is just the beginning. Are you truly prepared to choose me over the world you've always known? Matteo stood as well, his expression resolute, despite the tears gathering in his eyes. I made that choice the moment I met you. I just didn't know it yet. He walked her to the door, but made no move to stop her from leaving. As Niara stepped into the hallway, she turned back one last time. I do love you, she said softly. But love shouldn't be this painful. The last image she carried with her was Matteo standing in the doorway, looking utterly lost as the elevator doors closed between them. Chapter 9. Passion's Surrender. 3 weeks of silence stretched between them like an abyss. Niara threw herself into work, staying late at the gallery, taking on extra projects, anything to exhaust herself enough that she might sleep without dreaming of Matteo. He respected her request for space, sending only a single text. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here. My heart is yours always. The simplicity of it had brought tears to her eyes, but she'd resisted responding. Some decisions couldn't be made on the wings of emotion. "You're punishing yourself," Kezia observed over brunch, watching Niara push food around her plate. "And him." "I'm thinking," Niara corrected. "This isn't just about love, Kezia. It's about a lifetime of dealing with his family's prejudice, of knowing I'm the reason he's estranged from them." "That's his choice to make, not yours," her friend pointed out. "And from what you've told me, his father sounds like a nightmare anyone would be better off without." Niara sighed. "It's not that simple." "It never is," Kezia agreed. "But at some point, you have to decide if what you feel for him is worth fighting for." The question haunted Niara as she prepared for the opening of a rival gallery that evening. She'd considered cancelling. Industry gossip suggested Matteo might attend as a potential investor, but professional obligations won out over personal discomfort. She chose her outfit carefully, a sculptural midnight blue dress that accentuated her curves while projecting confidence. If she was going to face Matteo, she wouldn't appear broken or diminished by their separation. The gallery was crowded when she arrived, art world elite mingling with wealthy patrons. Niara scanned the room reflexively, both dreading and hoping to catch a glimpse of Matteo. Instead, her gaze landed on an unexpected figure, Matteo's father, engaged in conversation with the gallery owner. Her stomach clenched. She'd hoped to avoid any Cruz family drama tonight. As if sensing her attention, the older man looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly, before he excused himself from his conversation and approached. "Miss Bellamy," he greeted. Her, his tone cool but civil. "I hoped we might speak privately." Every instinct told Niara to refuse, but curiosity won out. "Briefly," she agreed, following him to a quieter corner of the gallery. "I'll come directly to the point," he said once. They were relatively isolated. "My son is making a catastrophic mistake, one that will have lasting repercussions for our family and business interests." Niara felt her spine stiffen. "If you're referring to our relationship, I'm referring to his decision to publicly separate." "And from Cruz Enterprises," he interrupted, "though the two are obviously connected." "I didn't ask him to do that," Niara said firmly. "Perhaps not directly," he conceded, "but your influence has clearly clouded his judgment." The thinly veiled racism in his tone made Niara's blood boil. "Mr. Cruz, I'm not sure what you hope to accomplish with this conversation, but he's ruining his life for you," the older man cut in bluntly. "And for what? Some romantic notion of love over duty? The Cruz name carries responsibilities, expectations, which apparently include embracing bigotry," Niara finished, unable to contain herself any longer. "Your son is an extraordinary man, talented, compassionate visionary. If you can't see that because you're too fixated on preserving some outdated notion of family purity, then you don't deserve to call yourself his father." Rather than anger, her outburst was met with a strange, appraising look. "You truly care for him," he observed, sounding almost surprised. "I love him," Niara corrected, "which is why I've given him space to make this decision carefully without emotional pressure." Something shifted in the older man's expression, not warmth exactly, but a reluctant recognition. "My son has always been stubborn," he said finally, "like his mother. Once his mind is made up, nothing moves him." He straightened. His tie, a gesture so reminiscent of Matteo that it made Niara's heart ache. "I came here tonight to make a public statement, to show the art world that the Cruz family is divesting from my son's independent ventures." Niara frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Ms. Bellamy, that I've accepted the inevitable. Matteo has made his choice. I don't agree with it, but I cannot change it." He glanced around the crowded gallery. "So I've decided to change instead." Before Niara could process these words, the older man raised his voice slightly, If you'll excuse me, I see the mayor has arrived. I need to introduce him to my son's fiancée. He's very interested in her community arts initiative. The declaration, clearly intended to be overheard by nearby patrons, left Niara speechless. As Mr. Cruz walked away, heads turned in her direction, whispers rippling through the crowd. She stood frozen, trying to make sense of what had just happened, when a familiar voice behind her said, "He actually did it." Niara turned to find Mateo watching his father's, retreating back with astonishment. He chose family after all. Mateo continued, looking stunned. "I didn't think he had it in him." "What just happened?" Niara demanded. Mateo's expression was a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. "My father just publicly acknowledged you as my fiancé, essentially giving his blessing to our engagement." "But why?" "I wish I knew," Mateo admitted. "I haven't spoken to him since that night at the hotel. My lawyer delivered the paperwork for my separation from the family business yesterday. I expected a fight, not this." He hesitated, then added, softly, "Maybe he recognized what I've known all along, that you're extraordinary, Niara, that any man would be fortunate to call you his wife." The words warmed her, but confusion lingered. "He doesn't approve of me." That was clear from every word he said. "No," Mateo agreed, "but he's chosen to respect my decision. For my father, that's practically a revolutionary act." He moved closer, hope lighting his eyes. "It means we could have a future without constant warfare. Distant civility isn't ideal, but it's better than open hostility." The possibilities settled over Niara. Not perfect, but perhaps workable. Still, she held herself back, unwilling to surrender to emotion too quickly. "We still have things to resolve," she reminded him. "Trust was broken, Mateo." "I know," he acknowledged, "and I'll spend a lifetime rebuilding it if you'll let me." He reached for her hand, his touch sending the familiar electricity through her body despite their weeks apart. "I miss you, Niara, every moment of every day." The raw honesty in his voice weakened her resolve. "I miss you too," she admitted. Before they could say more, the gallery owner called for attention, beginning a formal welcome to the exhibition. Mateo reluctantly released her hand but whispered, "Can we talk later, please?" Niara nodded, and they moved apart to join the crowd of listeners. Throughout the speeches and the official tour of the exhibition, she felt Mateo's gaze like a physical touch, warming her skin despite the distance between them. It was after midnight when Niara finally left the gallery, exhausted from maintaining professional composure while her emotional world tilted on its axis. The night had turned stormy while she was inside, rain falling in heavy sheets reminiscent of their first kiss. She had just hailed a cab when she heard her name. Turning, she found Mateo running toward her through the downpour, his expensive suit soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead. "I couldn't let you leave," he called over the sound of rain. "Not without telling you." Thunder crashed overhead, drowning his words as he reached her, rainwater streaming down his face like tears. "I would choose you over everything," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I have chosen you over everything." The echo of their first night in the storm was so perfect it took Niara's breath away. Without conscious thought, she stepped closer, drawn to him as inexorably as the tide to shore. "I love you," she whispered, the confession slipping past her defenses. "I tried to stop, to be rational, but—" His mouth claimed hers, cutting off her words with a kiss that held all the passion and desperation of their separation. Niara melted into him, her body remembering his touch even as her mind cautioned restraint. His hands framed her face, cradling her as if she were something infinitely precious. When they broke apart, both breathless, Mateo pressed his forehead to hers. "Come home," he pleaded, "not to my place or yours. Home to me, to us." The last of Niara's resistance crumbled. 3 weeks without him had taught her what life would be like if she walked away, Hollow, colorless, incomplete, the cab driver, watching their reunion with thinly veiled impatience, cleared his throat. "You getting in or what?" They fell into the back seat together, a tangle of wet limbs and burning need. The short drive to Niara's apartment was torturous, both of them maintaining a fragile control that shattered the moment her door closed behind them. Their reunion was explosive. Clothes discarded with desperate hands, bodies coming together with the perfect memory of what pleased the other. Matteo worshipped her with his mouth and hands, whispering apologies and declarations of love against her skin. When they finally became one, the pleasure was so intense it brought tears to Niara's eyes. But it was afterward, lying tangled in her, sheets as dawn light began to filter through the windows, that the true reconciliation occurred. They talked for hours, about fears and expectations, about family and future, about the trust that needed rebuilding. "I want to know everything," Niara insisted, her head resting on his chest where she could hear his steady heartbeat. "No more protected spaces, no more shielding me from difficult truths. Everything," Matteo promised, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "No more secrets. Your strength is one of the reasons I love you. I was wrong to try to shelter you from any part of my life." As morning light strengthened, casting golden patterns across their entwined bodies, Niara felt the lingering tension finally release. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Matteo's father might have offered public acceptance, but private prejudice wouldn't disappear overnight. There would be awkward family gatherings, subtle slights to weather, battles yet to be fought, but looking up at Matteo's face, seeing the love and commitment in his eyes, Niara knew with absolute certainty. This man, this love, was worth fighting for. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, reaching up to trace the curve of his jaw. Matteo turned his head to kiss her palm, his eyes shining with the same certainty she felt. "Better than okay," he promised. "We're going to be extraordinary." Chapter 10. Eternal Promise. The beach at sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, casting a magical glow over the intimate gathering. 6 months after their reconciliation, Niara stood at the beginning of a flower-strewn aisle, her heart racing beneath her flowing ivory gown that contrasted beautifully with her deep brown skin. Matteo waited beneath an arch of white orchids, the ocean stretching endlessly behind him. When their eyes met across the distance, everything else faded. The modest crowd of their closest friends and family, the soft music played by a string quartet, even the gentle crash of waves against the shore. In that moment, there was only him. As Niara walked toward her future husband, she passed Matteo's father, sitting stiffly in the front row. Their relationship remained complicated, but his presence today represented a hard-won victory. Beside him sat Matteo's mother Elena, who had become an unexpected ally and friend. Reaching the altar, Niara placed her hands in Matteo's. His eyes shimmered with emotion as he gazed at her with unmasked adoration. "You are more beautiful than any painting I could ever create," he whispered. Their vows were deeply personal, spoken with voices that occasionally broke with emotion. When Matteo referenced their beginning, "I told you I would propose if you could control yourself, but I'm grateful every day that neither of us has any control when it comes to this love." Laughter rippled through the gathering, followed by knowing smiles from those who had witnessed their passionate journey. As the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Matteo pulled Niara into a kiss that balanced public propriety with a promise of private passion to come. Their guests erupted in applause that mingled with the sound of waves, nature itself seeming to celebrate their union. The reception unfolded under the stars, lighting strung between palm trees creating a canopy of twinkling light. Their first dance as husband and wife was a slow, sensual sway. Their bodies pressed close as Matteo whispered promises in her ear that made her blush. "I can't wait to peel that dress from your body," he murmured, his lips brushing her ear, "to worship every inch of you as my wife." The intimacy of his words sent heat spiraling through Niara, despite the cool evening breeze. "I'm counting the minutes," she confessed. Later, after celebrating with their loved ones and bidding the last guests good night, they retreated to their private beachfront villa. Inside, hundreds of candles illuminated the space, rose petals scattered across the floor, leading to the bedroom. Matteo lifted her into his arms, carrying her across the threshold with reverent strength. "Mine," he whispered as he set her down beside the bed. "Finally, completely mine." "As you are mine," Niara responded, reaching up to unfasten the buttons of his shirt. Their lovemaking that night held all the passion of their first time, but with a new dimension, the security of promises made, of battles fought and won together. As their bodies joined in the familiar yet ever new dance of desire, Niara felt tears of joy escape from beneath her closed eyelids. In the afterglow, they lay tangled in silken sheets, the sound of waves providing a soothing backdrop to their whispered conversations about the future. The gallery they would open together, combining her curatorial expertise with his artistic vision. The children they hoped to have, the life they would build, that honored both their backgrounds while creating something entirely new. Niara traced the contours of Matteo's face in the moonlight streaming through the windows, memorizing him in this perfect moment. "I never thought I could be this happy," she admitted. Matteo captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "This is just our beginning," he promised, pulling her close as the ocean continued its eternal rhythm outside their window. "We have a lifetime of happiness ahead." As they drifted towards sleep in each other's arms, Niara smiled, finally allowing herself to believe completely in the forever they had fought so hard to claim. A love powerful enough to overcome prejudice, family expectations and their own fears. In Matteo's embrace, she had found her home, her passion and her eternal promise.